Ballet, as we know it, was born into the atmosphere of magnificence and extravagance that was the life here at Versailles in the late 17th century, when it was just being completed by Louis XIV, the Sun King. And what a brilliant and imaginative man he was. Versailles was the place that he loved best. He held his court here whenever he wasn't away leading his armies in war. And he supervised every detail of the chateau during the 20 years it took to build, and of the gardens which were laid out by Monsieur Le Notre. Since he was king from the age of 5, he reigned for 72 years, and it does seem odd to me that the history books never mention what he did for ballet. They hardly bother to say that in his youth he was a very keen dancer, because grace of movement was a manly virtue in the 17th and 18th centuries, and Louis excelled in this, as in everything he did. Until his time, ballets were only held at court, and they were nothing like they are today. The dancers were courtiers, so they were all amateurs, and the settings weren't theaters, but more likely a large hall in a palace. Louis made his first appearance in a court ballet when he was 12, and he was 14 when he played the Sun in a performance that lasted for 13 hours, interspersed with a few banquets. This ballet glorified his virtues as the supreme monarch, the Sun King, and he was always known by this name.
I can just imagine him entering the Hall of Mirrors, this superb room, and walking slowly through the crowd of people on either side, the men bowing and the ladies making a deep curtsy as he passes by. Every step Louis took was majestic, as he graciously acknowledged their reverence by doffing his hat to the ladies and highest dignitaries, or simply touching it in greeting to some of the lesser ranks. For every detail of etiquette at court was very finely regulated. Not all the courtiers wanted to be away from Paris. It was Louis who liked to hunt by day in the surrounding countryside, and when there was music and dancing here at night, he enjoyed his favorite dance, the slow courante. But it was essentially a tiny society. Everyone knew every detail of everyone else's life here. No one had secrets, not even the king. Louis had fallen in love with Versailles when he brought his bride here. They were married in 1660. At that time, none of this part of the palace existed. It was just a quite modest chateau which was built by his father. From the start, I think he was really rather more in love with Versailles than he was with his new wife, because it was only 4 years later. In fact, it was just as soon as these gardens were laid out and completed that he gave the first of the grand fêtes at Versailles, and it was mainly in honor of his mistress. These marvelously imaginative entertainments were set in various parts of the gardens and palace. Banquets were set out in the open and fruits hung from the trees. Special theatres were built in the park where the king and his guests watched the first performances of plays written specially for the occasion by Molière. An octagonal pavilion was the setting for formal dances. The first fête lasted for 3 days and included a new ballet composed by Lully. The marble courtyard, which is the entrance to the palace, was transformed into another stage and illuminated by 4,000 candles. The fête ended with a magnificent display of fireworks. It seems to me that Louis must have given a great deal of thought to dance, and that he was the first person who realized it was capable of becoming a theater art, like acting, which was already fully professional, because in its status as court ballet, it was limited. The performers were amateurs. and although the steps were very difficult, they couldn't progress further. He foresaw that in the hands of professional dancers, the art could develop limitlessly, and he set ballet on its long history when he established the first professional ballet school and company, and that was in 1669. And I can't help thinking how surprised he would have been then if he could have looked ahead 300 years and seen how that little seed that he planted would grow and flourish and would spread right across the world, even to far Cathay, which we call China. For you can see ballet now from Caracas to Cape Town to Peking, and the technique is universal. The names of the steps are still in French everywhere because of their origin under Louis XIV. The Peking Ballet School was founded in 1954, and the graduate students recently performed a new work by a Chinese choreographer to music by a Chinese composer on the Hans Christian Andersen story of the Little Match Girl. From the Peking Ballet School to the Paris Opera, students around the world are hard at work in their daily ballet classes. Wherever they are, the technique is the same. These are the pupils of the ballet school. They're continuing a tradition here that's been going on for 300 years. The boys are accepted into the school between the ages of 10 and 16, so in the early classes they're a little mixed in ages and standards. They have this class every morning, and they work dancing in the theatre in the mornings. In the afternoons, they have their general education all together with the other people from the opera.
Plier, relever. Plus en avant, s'il vous plaît. Oui. Hein? Encore. Plier, relever. Oui. Maintenant, plier de tout. C'est trop court derrière. Viens voir, Yannick. Viens voir. Plier. Là. Plier, relever. Attitude. Non, plier, appuie ton talon. Il est trop léger, ton talon. Plier, relever. Non, plus en avant. Encore. Plier, relever. Et attitude maintenant. Et serrer l'attitude derrière. Plier sans relâcher ton pied derrière. Oui. Bon, les garçons, premier groupe, on fait les demi-pliés cinquième.
Now he's telling them what the next step is going to be, and they're picking it up. This is near the end of the class, so they're starting to do the jumping steps, which of course they only do when their muscles are very well warmed up, so as not to damage the muscles or injure themselves.
Et très appuyé sur les talons. Plier. Encore. Et on bouge pas les bras. Plier. Oui, mais attention à ton genou là. Grand battement, cinquième et demi-pointe pliée entre chaises 6 avec les bras ramassés couronne. Hein? Et avec la tête surtout, en descendant et en remontant la tête du côté de la jambe et contraire en remontant. Alors, 1.
This is going to be the last step in the class. It's called a grand battement. The class is almost always finished with the grand battement. And they've made their bow, which will be to the public when they grow up and they become dancers. The famous French choreographer Roland Petit began his career here, and he continues a tradition of 300 years. Roland, how old were you when you started?
I started at 10 here in this room, and at 15 I was in the corps de ballet, and at 16 immediately in the corps de ballet here, I started to choreograph. I was not very happy with the ballets I was doing, and I was thinking that it was time for me to start to learn to do choreography, because it was for me the only way to express myself.
So young, but that's very early to start.
But I think that quite all the choreographers started very young. I don't think you become a choreographer when you stop dancing, you know, when you think, I'm going to stop dancing, I'll be a choreographer. I think it's something from your birth in the theater.
I remember being at the first performance of Carmen, which was terrifically exciting. How did you get the idea to do that marvelous ballet?
You know, I didn't know the opera at that time, and touring Germany, I saw that they were playing Carmen very often there. So one day off, I went to see Carmen, and I went in the theater. They started the overture, and I realized, hearing the overture, that was the ballet I was waiting for. So all my ideas of doing a ballet with girls smoking cigarettes and all these things, bedroom scenes and things like that, hadn't been done in ballets at that time. So all these ideas went in Carmen. I left the theater without seeing the opera that I saw maybe, I don't know, 10 years later, and went to the French consulate, found Mérimée novel, and during the night I had adapted the story as a ballet. The day after I heard the music with my pianist, cut it in pieces, did the ballet, and started the choreography. When we went to London and opened there.
It was marvelous. You did that for Zizi Jeanmaire, who's your wife.
Yes, I mean, we have been we known each other since the Paris Opera here. We were child together, working in this room. We met here when we were 10. And we had lots of fight and everything, you know, you remember. And I did this ballet for her, and after this ballet, I mean, then we got married, and we still are.
Carmen was created in 1948 to Bizet's music. This is the bedroom scene with Zizi Jeanmaire and Roland Petit. Around the ceiling of the Foyer de la Danse are portraits of the ballerinas from the very beginning up to the time they built this theatre just over 100 years ago in 1875.
When Louis XIV founded professional ballet, his gentlemen courtiers were permitted to appear in the theatre performances, but the stage wasn't thought a suitable place for ladies, and so for the first 12 years, all the female roles were danced by young men. Then, in 1681, the first professional ballerinas came out on the stage, led by Mademoiselle de la Fonteyn, who was 26 and greatly admired for her lightness and grace. They called her the Queen of Dance, but her public certainly left a great deal to be desired.
They were often drunk or brought dogs into the theatre, which added to the confusion when the public sang bawdy songs criticizing the morals of the artists.
I'm glad I'm the second Fonteyn, not the first. She retired early to a convent. Curiously, no one seems to know her first name, but her successor makes up for that. She was Marie-Thérèse Perdue de Soubligny. She had a pretty figure, and she was the first French ballerina to cross the Channel and dance in London. Soubligny danced with Monsieur Ballon, and he was a miracle of elegance. Louis XIV so admired his dancing that he was permitted to shake hands with the monarch and keep his hat on in the royal presence, which was a rare privilege for a commoner, shared only by Monsieur Le Notre, the gardener. Monsieur Ballon had a pupil called Marie Salé, and she was famous for being among the first to use dancing to express emotion instead of only showing technique. Her rival was La Camargo, and she caused a sensation, a scandal in Paris by shortening her skirts so as to show off the brilliance of her footwork in dances like these. When this opera house was built, the men in ballet were considered so unimportant that only ballerinas were chosen for the portraits. And Mademoiselle Vestris, who was an absolutely terrible dancer, has her picture up there, but her brother Gaetano, who was the rage of Paris and known as the god of dance, isn't shown at all. The Vestris came from Italy, and Gaetano made his debut at the opera in 1748. His son, Auguste, was indeed a superstar. His career came at the time of the first major changes in ballet, when the old-fashioned heavy costumes and enormous wigs disappeared. And Auguste, in his thin shirt and breeches and his very light shoes, was able to leap and spin in a spectacular way that had never been seen before. So with him, ballet technique began to advance on its own. Until that time, the steps of ballet were much the same as the usual court or social dances, which were so difficult that everyone had to take lessons. And the dancing masters were constantly devising new dances for them to do. These varied considerably from country to country around Europe. In 1780, for example, when Auguste was 20 years old, the grandees of Spain were enjoying a newly invented dance called the bolero.
Spanish dancing contributed a great deal to ballet technique, particularly the curved arm positions and movements. Influences like these were carried all over Europe by the professional dancers and especially the ballet masters, who seemed to travel constantly. It amazes me how much they did travel, considering how long and hazardous some of those journeys must have been. It must have been delightful at the time working in a theatre like this one built in 1766. Most of the theatres from that period were burnt down at least once and have been rebuilt. This is a royal palace at Drottningholm near to Stockholm, and the story of its little theatre is like a fairy tale. It slept for over 100 years, and when it was rediscovered in 1921, no one remembered it had ever been a theatre. But now every summer it relives its past. Cupid Out of His Humour is a recreation by Mary Skeeping of a ballet that dates from the time of Louis XIV. Cupid, the god of love, has lost his wits and the world laments, but the goddess Venus tries to bring him back to reason. Diana interrupts the scene, and the two goddesses quarrel over Cupid until a roll of thunder announces the arrival of Jupiter, who restores the peace. The thunder machine was just some stones in a long wooden box. The entire theatre was lit only by candles. In the wings, these battens have 5 metal containers, each holding 2 candles. And all of them can be rotated towards the stage for more light or away from the stage to dim it by this winch here. Obviously, these were the most terrible fire risk. I think it's rather ironical that the electric substitute is caged, whereas the naked flames were completely unprotected. But here we have an 18th century firefighting appliance, a large kind of rope broom which you dipped in a bucket of water and beat out the flames. If more water's needed, there's always the sea. Isn't that a simple trick? No theatre was built in the old days without that most essential part of the magic, a trap. Down here, everything happens with the efficiency of a ship, a sailing ship, of course, with wood, ropes, and pulleys operated by hand. In the 18th century, that was how theatres normally worked. Here is the 10-second scene change, this capstan turned by 4 men. During scene changes, it's only a couple of steps to the star dressing room, and the other dressing rooms are very nearby. They don't build theatres like that anymore. Nor could one possibly imagine the luxury of hand-painted, original 18th century wallpaper. This seems to be quite thick paper, and it's stitched down the seams and nailed at the edges. I love the bluebirds. Everyone's a little bit different. Over here, a little washstand and the dressing table. And this is a wig block. It was one of the things found in the theatre when it was rediscovered, so it is part of the old 18th century equipment. The dancers and the actors who would have been working in this theatre would very likely have been members of a group of traveling players who might have come from as far as France or Italy, and they would stay here for the whole summer season, children and all, and they lived right upstairs. This apartment has 2 rooms, probably for the principals of the troupe. Lovely stove here. That would have kept warm all day long. And the bed. Oh, rather hard. I think it's made of straw. This is the sitting room. You'd hardly believe we were in a theatre, but just the other side of that wall is the upper part of the stage area. The performances would have included the children. This trick dance very probably had its origins long ago in Italy, and it's used in a ballet called Dance Mania, first given in 1800. While kings and courtiers were entertained in their private theatres, the country people amused themselves with simpler summer pleasures. This rustic scene in the French countryside would be another perfect place for dancing on the green. But it's many years since anyone lived in these well-kept cottages, and even then the owner of the big house never slept the night there. She always returned to one of her palaces nearby, because this is in a corner of the park at Versailles, where little over 100 years after Louis XIV built his magnificent chateau and founded ballet at the Paris Opera, Queen Marie Antoinette built this little village, and she used to come here dressed as a milkmaid to escape from the tedious formalities of life at court. Perhaps unconsciously, she was reflecting the changing artistic tastes that preceded the French Revolution, and ballet, of course, was affected too by these changes. For the first time, stories about the gods and goddesses of mythology gave way to plots about ordinary people, the peasants and bourgeoisie. It was in 1789, just 2 weeks before the revolution broke out, that the French choreographer Jean d'Auberval created the first important ballet of this kind. It was called La Fille Mal Gardée, and taken from this picture, which shows a mother scolding her disobedient daughter for flirting with the boy next door. In 1960, Frederick Ashton created his own version for Britain's Royal Ballet, and an excerpt is danced here by Wendy Ellis and David Wall as the lovers, and Ronald Emblem as the mother. music for the Lovers' Pas de Deux was written for the famous ballerina Fanny Elsler when she danced the ballet.